Well, good morning. Today I am continuing my saga on our trip out west, and I titled this one Discovering More Things Along the Way. So after our awesome visit with our friends in San Antonio, we headed further west, and I mean it was really isolated, and we had to stop at a service station to get some gas, and I think the caps that they had for sale summed it up real good, because it was in Sheffield, Texas, and the cap says, "Where in the hell is Sheffield, Texas?" But we stopped by Van Horn, Texas, and then we went into Juarez just to say we'd been into Mexico, and I cannot believe the contrast between the United States and Mexico with just a river that separated the two. But anyway, we got over there, and you know, I'd seen all these movies with Ava Gardner and the Matador and the bull ring. It was so romantic and so excited. I thought, well, I want to go to a bullfight, you know. Well, when I got over there and saw the bull ring, it kind of dampened all my spirits about wanting to go to a bullfight, and I decided it's probably too gory for me anyway. So we only stayed about an hour because Fred was ready to get out of there. I think he felt like that they were going to arrest him for being in the wrong country or something. I don't know, but anyway, he wanted to get out. So we only stayed about an hour in there, but we visited the Pueblo Indian Reservation, and it was real interesting to see how they baked their bread a long time ago. It's kind of like in adobe beehive ovens, and they would put the mesquite branches in there and build a fire, and then whenever it got it so hot, then they'd take the branches out, swab out the deck, put the bread in there and cook it. And we ate some of it. It was really good. And from there we went to Ranger Peak in El Paso, and we could look back at the Guadalupe mountains in Mexico, and we visited in El Paso, and from there we went to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and we went to, there was a restaurant there called La Pasta, or Post, or whatever. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but that's y'all, you have to forgive me, I'm from the South. But anyway, it was famous because Billy the Kid was said to have eaten there. And it was really nice. It had this beautiful atrium in there, you know, and the hanging greenery, you know, and glass, and I loved it. And so we didn't have Mexican food in Savannah back in the day at that time. So they brought us out, we ordered, and then they brought out a big pitcher of ice water, and they brought the tortilla chips and the salsa. Well, Fred never did anything delicately or dainty, you know, like with this. He just take the thing and scooped it up. He must have got a good tablespoonful or more of that salsa and eat it. And all of a sudden, it set him on fire. You could almost see the smoke coming out of his ears and his nostrils. It was so hot. And he didn't like it at all. He said, "I should have known something when they brought that pitcher of ice water." So that was a bad experience for us, but I couldn't even get him to go in a Mexican restaurant for years and years. But anyway, we traveled and stopped at a lot of places that people had told us to go to see. And we went to Truth or Consequences in Silver City and the Gila National Forest, one of the most beautiful and majestic places we visited. The woods and the mountains and the wildflowers and even the birds and the wildlife that was there. It was just awesome, and it was like hairpin turns on those mountains, but everywhere we turned it was another beautiful vista that we saw. So we climbed up to the Gila cliff dwellings, and these were natural caves that were in the mountains, and up to 40 families lived in these caves at one time, and you had to walk up a path to get up there to them. But the scenery was gorgeous. You know, all these real estate agents now say, it's location, location, location. Well, I've never seen anybody that had a prettier location than that. Of course, you didn't have I didn't see any neighbors anywhere close by, but it was beautiful from where you could look out over that. Then we went to Tombstone, Arizona, saw where the gunfight at OK Corral took place with Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, shot it out. Then we went to Fort Huachuca and Colossal Cave, and drove through Saguaro National Park, and the hills and the cacti that were there were just Oh, it was so pretty. And then we traveled on. We got to Tucson about 7 o'clock at night. And evidently, we came into the ritzy part of town because we would stop and look at a motel to try to find somewhere to spend the night. It was like $500 a night back then. And we knew we weren't going to stay there. But and I don't know how big Tucson was, but when we was looking for a motel, it seemed to me like we drove for 2 hours, I know. And so we finally, we got into Tucson about 7 o'clock, but it was 10 o'clock that night before we found a travel lodge that was $25 a night. And that was a good price back in the day. So we checked in and we went to bed. And nobody but God knew where we were because, you know, the time was so different. Everybody had already gone to sleep in our part of the town, in part of the world where we came from. So anyway, the next morning at 7 o'clock, the phone rang. And I thought, who in the world is calling us? I mean, there must be an emergency, but how did the police even know where we were? So anyway, Fred answered the phone and he says, Jimmy. Jimmy who? And so then he pronounced the guy's last name. And it was the son of one of his friends back home in Savannah that was living in Tucson, Arizona. And his girlfriend worked at the travel lodge where we checked in that night. And when he come to pick her up from work, she said, well, I checked in a couple from Savannah, Georgia. And he says, well, who was it? And she told him Fred O'Berry. And he said, oh, I know him. I'm going to call him. She said, you better not call him. I'll get fired, you know. So he waited until 7 o'clock the next morning to call us. And so nothing would do but that. He took us out to breakfast. And so we went out, we met him, and we went to breakfast. And then he wanted to show us Tucson. So we said, why not, you know. So he carried us to... let me see where all he did take us. He took us to the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, and he carried us to the San Xavier Mission, one of the oldest on the Papaco Indian Reservation. And then we went to the Flandreau Planetarium at the University of Arizona. And then he actually carried us to a swap meet, which was a very big thing out in Arizona. And all you could see was just it looked to me like a mile of people that had come out there with their trucks and the tents and set up for this swap meet. But just about the time we got there, we didn't get to see much because just about the time we got there, we could see this horrible rain approaching that was coming across the desert. So we had to pack. We didn't get to look around. We just had to pack up and leave. But anyway, we had a wonderful day. I mean, he was a great tour guide. And his girlfriend told us they were having ribeye steaks that night at the motel for $5. And so we took him out to eat that night. And so we said, well, Jimmy, we know that the Lord has sent us to tell people about what all he's done in our life. And it looks like he's appointed you to be the one to listen. So we sat there and we shared our testimony with him. So it was a wonderful evening. And then he wanted us to come and spend the night with him. He said, you won't have to pay for a motel. And he says, you'll be comfortable there. And Fred asked me, I said, well, it couldn't be no worse than where we were. So we went to his house to spend the night. And he even offered us to be able to wash our clothes while we were there. So we did that. And he had he might have been a bachelor. But and the mobile home that he lived in was clean and neat. And we were blessed to be able to spend the night with him, and besides all that we got to enjoy. So then from there we went on and we got to San Diego, and we went to the San Diego Zoo and went to SeaWorld, and we enjoyed a luau one of the nights at the Nautilus building, and where we looked out over the bay that was San Diego Bay, and we went for a boat ride. And then they gave us leis, and we went to a buffet meal, and they had the Hawaiian musicians and the hula dancers. So we had a lot of fun with that. And the next day we went to San Juan Capistrano, and I'd heard all about the legend of the swallows that come. They come there every March the 19th and they leave on October the 23rd. It's like they got a time clock, but they do that. So we got to see that, and it was a very beautiful old mission. And so it actually is one of the oldest buildings in California. Then we went to Universal Studios, and we saw the stuntmen being shot from the tops of the buildings, and we saw Count Dracula in his castle, and we took a 2-hour tour through the sound and special effects stages and back lot, and saw where all the fake buildings were. We got attacked by Jaws, and the Red Sea parted, and we went through on dry land, and it was really something to see. Oh, and we even got to star in Airport 77. 35 people out of the audience was picked to star in a movie with Jack Lemmon, and we were 2 of the 35. And then we went on to Bakersfield, California, where Fred was stationed when he was in the Army. And then the next morning we got up, and we called Lisa, and she said, I talked to her, and she didn't say anything to me, but when Fred got on the phone, she told him that somebody had broken into our house back home. So she had gone up there, and the back door had been broken into, and one of the panes was missing out of the glass. And she said she could see where a fire had been started, and but she didn't know that they had taken anything. She couldn't see anything that was taken. And so we got off the phone, and we thought, well, what are we going to do? And I said, we're halfway across the world. I said, we can't do anything about it now. It's already been done. And I said, the Lord gave it to us to start with, and He can do it again. And I said, so Fred and I got together, and we prayed, and we told the Lord just what I told you. And we said, God, with your help, we're not going to let this ruin our vacation. So we did not discuss the break-in anymore until we got almost home. So, but we did not allow the devil to steal our wonderful vacation from us. I could tell you about Yosemite National Park and seeing El Capitan, Half Dome, and Bridal Veil Falls. We went to the San Joaquin and Modesto valleys with miles and miles of vineyards. We went to the Sequoia National Park with the largest trees I've ever seen. And it would have been fun to tell you everything we shared on that Gray Line tour that we took of San Francisco. And we went to the Presidio and the San Francisco Bay and Alcatraz. We saw it. We didn't actually go there. And at the Twin Peaks, you could see a panoramic view of the whole city of San Francisco. We crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, and we went to Fisherman's Wharf. And we took a trolley back to Union Square through Chinatown. And man, our car was packed with Chinamen. And that morning I had seen this woman in a fur coat. And I mean, I had on shirt sleeves that time. And I did have a jacket. And so I thought, what in the world is she doing wearing a fur coat? And on our tour, they had told us that we had 4 different climate changes in San Francisco. Well, we experienced several of them when we were on the tour. But that night, I wish I had had that woman's fur coat. It was cold in San Francisco. And then I looked on the map, and from San Francisco over to the most beautiful drive in the United States, I was told, going along the Pacific. It was just a little short space on that map. It looked like about 30 miles. So I said, Fred, let's go that way. And I said, we can see the sun setting whenever we get over there on the mountains. Well, we hadn't been in, probably gone more than about 15 minutes. The fog rolled in. And we couldn't see 5 feet in front of us, y'all. I've never seen such a thick fog. And we were on hairpin turns. And what I thought was going to take us 30 minutes must have took 2.5 or 3 hours to get over there. By the time we got to the Pacific Ocean, I knew that we were high up on a ledge going around these mountains. And we drove and drove and drove. And finally we got to, I believe it was Santa Barbara. And by this time it was late again. And we went to this restaurant, and it was Greeks running it. And Fred had a lot of Greek friends in Savannah. First thing you know, the father I think his name was Father John. Father John and the owner of the Greek restaurant was over there sitting with us, and we were all having a great time visiting. So that was a fun thing to do. And so then the next morning, we started back on our trip back east. And but I did get to wet my feet in the Pacific, so I didn't get to go swimming. But I took off my shoes and I walked out there in that cold water and I went barefoot. So I have had my feet in the Pacific Ocean. But by this time we had seen so many wonderful things. And we had met so many wonderful people on the way. And we'd enjoyed good weather all the way except for that fog that came in. We saw things that we didn't even know existed. And last but not least, God gave us peace, and we didn't worry about that house being broken into. So I just want to praise God that we were able to handle that without getting upset and letting it ruin our vacation. And I also thanked God for the wonderful friends that we had met at the Travel Lodge that night. So God's given me a spiritual vacation, y'all. Not like what I planned, but it's been a very spiritual and meaningful vacation so far. Join me next week. So listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks.